heart of the classroom, an obsidian lectern pulses with veins of silver light, responding to the presence of power. Before it stands Magico-Professor and Intermediary Subdean Goldrick Borntheal, his robes of midnight blue embroidered with images that reject the eye. Sharp as shattered glass sweep across the room, settling on each of the 3 apprenticed wizards. Beaten, worn, but upright. "Welcome," he says, "to Realms Unknown." Welcome to Realms Unknown, a podcast brought to you by the Bugle, dark hemigod of nonsense, hosted by author and comedian Alice Fraser, that's me, who each week will open the grimoire of knowledge to impart to the eager listener all the arcane knowledge they could desire about science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction, games, movies, television, and more. The cost for knowledge such as this you must pay in life itself. About 1/2 of your mundane hours will be sufficient sacrifice. Half that if you want your entertainment as efficiently optimized as possible. My companion and guide for this week's adventure, the Arwen to my Aragorn, the Sam to my Frodo, the Sandor Clegane to my Arya Stark, will be Eleanor Morton. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, you were pausing to see if I had more bullshit to spout.
I mean, who knows?
You're like, has it ended? It never ends.
I was thinking, my nerd brain immediately switched on, and I was thinking, oh well, Samwise, he's got a daughter called Eleanor, so there's a connection there actually.
Ah, true. Inherited servitude. Last week we were in the classics, deep in the weeds of the classics, which I think is going to be sort of a fortnightly caper, evens and odds. But that means this week it's fresh meat, new news. Before we get started, Eleanor, what have you been listening to, reading, absorbing of late?
Well, I'm quite late to the party. I don't know if you've discussed this already. I watched The Substance for the first time. And I don't know, I feel like that's sci-fi. Does that count as sci-fi? Have you seen it, Alice?
It does count as sci-fi.
Chris is nodding. Producer Chris.
I've seen basically one episode of Severance since my child was born, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm entirely relying on this podcast to legitimize me to be able to watch things. Now I can say it's work. That's all I'm doing this podcast for.
Well, I definitely, if you have a moment and you're not, I don't know how much of a body horror person you are or how much you can stomach. It is a bit like childbirth, spoilers, but backwards. I won't say too much. People who know. But yeah, it's just been nominated for a bunch of Oscars as well. So it is, and if you don't know The Substance, it is a French film, ooh la la, and it is about it's Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley as 2 versions of the same woman, a woman who discovers this thing called the substance that can help you supposedly become a better version of yourself. But no spoilers, it doesn't all go to plan. But I thought it was a great homage to a lot of the sort of sci-fi and horror of the past, and it looks amazing, sometimes too amazing. I felt a bit sick, so if you have a bad stomach, maybe avoid it. But yeah, I loved it, and I thought it was very it was hard to explain why, but like before I knew it was a French film, I was like, this is a French film. I can't tell you why, but it's not American. Like the way they film this, the way they portray stuff, it's like, this is French. I don't know how to tell you this, but it's French.
There's just something very French about it. Well, this is the thing. Most of the things that I get to watch, I end up watching on aeroplanes, which, depending on the air flight, has differing levels of censorship. So, for example, I watched The Shape of Water on a UAE flight. And the sort of a Middle Eastern Airways flight, and the beginning of that movie, if you don't know, the protagonist is a lady and she makes herself an egg and then she masturbates in the bath, and it's a way of introducing this character as sort of sensual and in touch with her body. I found this out some years after I'd watched a movie that I thought just began with a lady making herself breakfast.
Listen, in a way, isn't that what that is, making yourself breakfast? Were you sitting next to people who were surprised to see the fish people sex on the plane, or?
But this is the thing; it had no sex. It was completely censored.
Oh, I see. I thought, yes. Okay, wow. So yeah, so it just cuts and cuts and cuts around all the bits that make the plot.
Just a lady making herself an egg,
yeah,
and then going to the aquarium. That's all that movie is.
I think if you cut The Substance for a plane, it would be just the story of 2 mismatched flatmates who hate each other and never seem to be in the same room at the same time. which you don't also watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of tired of gritty reboots and restarts. What we need to do is start cutting together old stuff to tell different stories.
I remember they used to cut The Simpsons a lot on Channel 4. And so they'd cut out, like, not, mild swear words and sex references, but yeah, you'd always be able to tell there'd be a sudden jump in the plot, and you'd be like, I feel like I missed something there, but you wouldn't know until years later when you watched it again, and you're like, oh, he said bastard. Oh, right, okay.
News. This is the news. There's a lot of news this week, and most of it is new news about old news. Top story, top headline: Sarah Michelle Gellar, after years of saying she would never, never, never revisit Buffy, has teased the return of Buffy, a reboot, a return. She says there's a team of 4 incredible women who are behind it, and they're going to tell the story in a way that will not let the fans down, which is, I say, a pre-announcement is guaranteed to end in a product that will let the fans down.
Yeah, no pressure.
Apart from the eco-friendly approach of this Hollywood, refusing to do anything but reuse and recycle, how do you feel about a revenant Buffy, Eleanor, on a scale from "it's alive, ha ha ha, it's alive" to "stick a stake in its heart and kill it"?
Well, this is the embarrassing thing. As a nerd sci-fi horror fan, I never watched Buffy.
I also never watched.
Okay. Oh my god. Oh, let's bond over that. Yeah, I think it was on slightly too early, and then the remake was the reruns were slightly too late, and there was just something that I missed. And I don't know. I think this sounds very sad, but this is how nerdy I was. Buffy seemed, I thought, too cool for me, so you can imagine just how lame I was. But no, I never watched it. Although I did find out that it was itself a remake, because there was an original film of Buffy. Yeah, I have to. Yeah, you're right. I think they've set themselves up for a fall. I can't quite fulfill all of what the fans want, but
because what the fans want is to be young again. Like, that's the nature of going back to, like, things that felt incredibly special when you were young. Part of what felt incredibly special when you were young was just being young and experiencing something,
Yeah, and they want a young Sarah Michelle Gellar, and they want a younger Anthony Head, and they want everyone just to be. They just want it to be the 90s, which I understand. What I remember of the 90s was very nice, so I'm not. In fact, I can link this vaguely to sci-fi. I'm excited because apparently there's been a potential Romy and Michelle sequel in the works, and Michelle wears a Star Trek dress in the high school reunion scene. So there you go. That's a sci-fi film. But yeah, that's the Buffy era thing I'm excited about. But I mean, we got so much vampire stuff now. It's so it really, we had Twilight, we had Vampire Diaries, we had, what was the True Blood.
True Blood.
So I don't know, maybe everyone's vampired out. I don't know.
We've got Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, I did enjoy Charmed, actually. I did watch Charmed as a kid, and it's kind of got the same vibe, sort of slightly cheesy 90s. So maybe that's what people want. They don't want gritty vampires, they want fun vampires. Not vampires all fun, not vampires who suck fun, but vampires that are fun.
I think in True Blood that's not so much suck fun as fuck fun, but there you go.
Yay. That's a very campy one.
On the other end of the spectrum, screenwriter Bob Gale, who was the writer on Back to the Future, has responded to queries as to whether there will be a reboot of Back to the Future. He says, people always say, when are you going to do Back to the Future 4? And we say, fuck you. That's his response. Steven Spielberg has halted a potential sequel to E.T., describing it as a hard-fought victory to preserve the original film's legacy. And that is all of our reboot re-news. Apparently, Alan Moore's The Great When is out, a fantastical exploration of London blending historical and imaginative elements. And there's also a lot of buzz about A.G. Riddle's Antarctic Station, which is a fast-paced techno-thriller set in a mysterious South Pole facility. In gaming news, an Atomfall announcement. Rebellion has announced Atomfall, a game set in an alternate history of the 1957 wind-scale fire in the UK's Lake District, which is a potential nuclear explosion situation. It's allegedly, this game is going to be embracing a cozy catastrophe vibe. and with a
Lovely.
immersive experience and player-driven choices and a distinctively British setting, which is what everyone wants in their games. And in UK crossover news, this is the news where Realms Unknown has clashed with the real world. The Ministry of Defence has collaborated with a bunch of sci-fi writers, enlisting science fiction authors to help prepare for potential future threats, including pandemics and cyber attacks. So this is a collaboration aiming to project forward possible narratives that can inform UK policy planning for future crises. Imagine that. I'm a science fiction writer for the government. Don't know why they don't hire comedians.
Fully mad.
Would you be a government comedian?
I mean, I have been. I briefly did some stuff for the SNP that was, and like all political comedy, it could have been funnier. But the idea of writing sci-fi for the government, how is that meant to make us feel safer? I feel less safe if they're letting sci-fi writers, I don't want that. That implies to me that something really scary is happening. So I'd rather not have that. Although I'm sure, in World War II, they employed various, creatives to kind of give the war effort a bit of a zhuzhing up. They hired a magician. I forgot his name, but they hired a magician who sort of taught the I don't know if it was the SOE or the army to sort of these various stealth and magic tricks to hide things.
The bomb's over there.
Sort of like, basically, yeah, the magic of distraction and things. So I'm not. It's not that the government have previous. I'm not surprised they would be choosing to do this. But I wouldn't have told us that. I wouldn't. I'd have kept that information secret because now I'm scared.
I'm all for it. More money into the arts industry, I say. And that brings us to our subgenre spotlight, which this week we're looking into a subgenre of sci-fi or fantasy. This week it is Grimdark. Are you familiar with Grimdark?
I don't think so. Maybe. What is it?
Well, we did cozy fantasy before, and now we're doing Grimdark, which is the opposite end of the spectrum. If cozy fantasy is the genre or the subgenre in which nothing happens particularly threatening and the stakes are very low, Grimdark will often open with our 13-year-old male protagonist gutting a young lady in order to make a point about a game of cards that he's cheating at.
Oh God.
There's a lot of sort of deliberately proving how awful often our protagonists are, and the redemption arcs are sort of mildly less evil or possibly more competently evil as a general rule. Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence is probably one of the epitomes of the genre. It's really bleak, but in a kind of a fascinating way. The characters are awful, but also very understandable and sympathetic in certain ways. I found it it took me quite a while to read because I had to dip in and out of it depending on whether I was in the mood for it. But it is very well written. Gardens of the Moon, which is the sort of Malazan series, is also a good example of something that I would say borders on Grimdark. Or The Black Company by Glenn Cook is also probably the early text of Grimdark that I think people would probably see. So if you want a short entry point into Grimdark, I would say probably Mark Lawrence, Glenn Cook with The Black Company, and Joe Abercrombie for the most entertaining version, I think, of this genre. Joe Abercrombie is also very funny and might be a little bit more palatable if you just want to dip your toe in the waters. But more on Joe Abercrombie upcoming. Eleanor, would you read Grimdark? Does it sound like something that you would read? Or is it not your bag of tea?
No, thank you. No. I just everything's already grimdark. I think we're living in grimdark, so I don't know why you'd read it, but you know what? Good on people. I wonder if there's a need here, to go darker and darker, and at what point we just get to a point where we go, well, this is too much. We need pull it back. I am more a cozy fantasy, and I'm sad I missed that week.
Oh no, Legends and Lattes, definitely try Legends and Lattes.
Okay, noted.
That's your entry point for cozy fantasy. Yeah, I think for Grimdark is for people who are like, it could be worse. If that's what
Yes,
you
that's
find
true.
comforting.
Yes. This is how I felt when I watched The Terror, about the Arctic expedition, because yeah, it could be worse. You could be freezing cold and being chased by a monster. So I understand the appeal, but I think it's not for me. I'd like to be a tiny squirrel living in a little house in a tree, please. And maybe there's a wizard. I don't know.
Oh, A House on the Cerulean Sea is also a very good cozy fantasy recommendation.
Noted.
Now it's time for your ad section now, because you can't buy what you can't imagine. And this episode of podcast is brought to you by Chrono Corporation, time travel agency. Rewrite your past, own your future. Subscribe to a monthly Chronocorp membership and take control of your past, your present, and your future. Thinking about it? Wondering whether you should? You already have! Tired of regrets? Wish you hadn't sent that text? Instead of self-improvement, try going back into the past and making a different and equally stupid mistake until you realize you're the problem. And then go back and try to unsubscribe from your monthly Chronocorp membership and realize you can't. You never could. We signed you up before you were born. And while you might try to leave, we know exactly when to ask you to stay. Terms and conditions apply. We will bill you up front for a lifetime's use, and don't think we don't know how long that's going to be. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Warty Comb Jelly, a creature without a fully installed anus that produces temporary anuses on demand. The Warty Comb Jelly. Look it up. Find your Warty Comb Jelly in half a glass of water. And that's your ad section for today. Have you encountered the Warty Comb Jelly, Eleanor Morton?
No, not yet. Do you recommend it?
I highly recommend it. I was so into the Warty Comb Jelly at one point that I wrote about 4 minutes of stand-up on it. And I was so bullish on that 4 minutes of stand-up that I did it at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival Gala as part of a 5-minute set. And then when that went to television, my set was 1 minute and a half because they'd cut all the jellyfish anus material.
You can't even say anus just because, jellyfish, they have them, apparently. So it looks very pretty. Is it bioluminescent?
It just doesn't have any anuses, and then when it wants an anus, it produces one on demand.
Does it shine like an anus light on the sky, and then the other Vorticone jellies know that they need to become anus? Does it become in it like one big anus? Is this going to get cut?
That brings us to our what we've been watching, reading, or playing section. What's your newest obsession, Eleanor Morton?
My newest obsession is a computer game in the style of, I want to say 8-bit. I don't know enough about computer games. It's not a new game, but it's new to me. It's called Hobbs Barrow. And it is a horror game based on M.R. James style ghost. I'm a big fan of ghost stories, and especially classic ghost stories. And it's based on it's a what do you call the games? Is it point and click? Is it when you sort of you need to do various different tasks to go around a little environment and a narrative driven adventure. Chris is saying, thank you. Yes, so it's based on those sort of antiquarian Edwardian themed you go to a place and the locals are all very sort of suspicious, and it's a lot of fun, and it's the art is in that style of sort of early computer game sort of pixels, and yeah, it's surprisingly spooky and atmospheric for a game like that. It's about this female archaeologist, and she goes to this Yorkshire village to try and do some archaeology, but the locals aren't happy with her being there, so see what happens. And I discovered Alistair Beckett King did something to do with the creation of the game. So there you go, small world. I did not play it. It's called Hobbs Barrow, or the excavation of Hobbs Barrow, I think. And I'm hoping that they will do some more game. The company is Cloak and Dagger Games. And I hope they do more of the same, because there is a market for that, and I am that market.
It sounds good. If I were had time to game, I would game that game. That's what you do with games, right? You game them? No, you play them. I I have actually watched an episode of something and I want to watch more. This is really exciting for me. On the aeroplane, I managed to download and watch one episode of a show called Pantheon, which is
Ooh.
extraordinarily good. It is animated, it's science fiction. The premise is that there's a girl whose father has died, and she is being cyberbullied at school, and then someone starts defending her online, and she realizes it is the uploaded consciousness of her father in the cloud,
Ooh.
which is being controlled in a large facility in the Arctic or Antarctic or some snowy wasteland somewhere. Massive computer mainframes that are hosting the uploaded consciousnesses, and it's not straight, like it's so far. I'm really excited to see where it goes because it's not ham-fisted, it's not cliched. The tone of it is incredibly beautiful, and you're introduced to a number of really fascinating characters, including a guy who's sort of like a genius level computer programmer, and he's in an abusive home, and you realize at the end of the first episode, spoiler alert, for the end of the first episode of Pantheon, you realize that his parents, who are miserable and like torn, and his father's abusive and everything, that they're actors playing the role of terrible parents in order to help cultivate his computer genius. And
Wow.
I am intrigued. I really want to watch the rest of it. I'm not normally an anime type watcher, but this is really, the ideas are brilliant. The script is brilliant. The voice acting is really solid. It is, at the moment, as far as I can tell, there's 2 seasons, and they are full, complete season. It's not dangling. And they are available on Australia and New Zealand Amazon Prime, and I'm not sure if you can get them anywhere else in the world in their complete form. So VPN, but you might want to find yourself in Australia or New Zealand, either physically or through astral projection, in order to watch Pantheon, because that's my current obsession. I'm really like, I've only watched one episode and I'm thinking about it quite a lot. So
Ooh.
that brings us to Trope on a Rope. This week's Trope on a Rope, we are discussing the tropes that we love or hate, or love to hate, or hate to love. Eleanor, Morton, what's your Trope on a Rope for this week?
Well, I thought it would be remiss of me not to do a redhead trope because there's a few of them. So you can choose. We can either do redheads are uncool, which is a trope, which is great, or fiery redhead, which is about how we've all got anger issues. Alice is the one you want to, one you prefer?
Let's go with fiery redhead, because I feel like that's
All right,
more common in fiction. In fiction, I feel like the redhead is pedestaled rather than sidelined.
Oh yeah, thank you. See, it's funny because as one, I feel like growing up, a lot of geeks and nerds and bullies were often redheads in various things. But yes, the fiery redhead is this trope, which is, yeah, it's pretty old. In fact, it goes all the way back at least to Gulliver's Travels, when Gulliver goes to the land of the horse people, whose name I can't pronounce. He mentions that I think it's the horse people. Anyway, he mentions that the redheads are the particularly tempestuous ones of these horse people. So it's a very old trope, and it turns up in a lot of stuff, especially fantasy and things like that, because there's so many more redheads in fantasy. For some reason, the gene is more prevalent. And basically the idea is that the gene also gives us terrible tempers and sort of passionate demeanors, which I think, as someone who was, has red hair and was bullied for it, they're connected. Yes, I do have a short temper, but that's only because people have annoyed me for a long time. It sort of writes itself there. It's a bit of a catch-22 in terms of tropes.
You know who I feel is the epitome of this trope is Eddie Redmayne
Yes.
in Jupiter Ascending, who's the villain in Jupiter Ascending. Eddie Redmayne, obviously very beautiful, very redhead.
Yes.
But he's sulky, he's petulant, he's dramatic, he's hysterical. He's got some weird, like, sexual, incestuous thing going on with a family member. I can't remember if it's his mother or sister or both. He's constantly, like, preening and cackling and being both beautiful and redheaded. So I feel like he's probably, like, the pinnacle of redhead trope.
I think so. That's the one where he's wearing eyeliner, isn't it? He's looking very very glam.
That movie is, for me, just an absolute guilty pleasure. I've watched it more than once, and it does not deserve to be watched even once. It's
Well, if you want, yeah, if you
Sean
want another,
Bean's a bee. Sean Bean plays a bee in it.
yes, and someone's a dog. Oh wait, am
Yep.
I thinking of Channing Tatum? He's wearing the eyeliner. That's it.
Yeah, Channing Tatum is the dog man, and Sean Bean is the bee man, and
If you want, a fantasy version, you can look at. I mean, this is only in the films. I don't know if this is canon in the books, but Gimli in Lord of the Rings as well is a traditionally short-tempered short man with red hair who is always grumbling and yelling and hitting things with axes. So I do enjoy it to a point. It's an excuse for me to get angry and pretend it's just some kind of weird genetic thing I've got that I can't help. Um, but it's interesting how much it comes up, especially in fantasy and sci-fi.
Your Trope on a Rope, the angry, fiery redhead, delightful for reference, Jupiter Ascending, and The Hobbit. If you
Mm-hmm.
haven't, if you're a fantasy and sci-fi reader who haven't encountered The Hobbit yet, maybe give that a little.
You heard of that? The Lord of the Rings? You heard of that? It's going to be big.
My trope on a rope is somebody storming off in an argument in the middle of some incredibly dangerous circumstance and immediately getting into trouble. That is
Yes, that's a good one.
the trope where someone getting mildly annoyed leads them to completely suspend all of their judgment and storm off in the midst of like a battle or a siege or the nighttime in a forest surrounded by orcs or some shit like that. I think that is my trope on a rope for a week because I just don't think that anyone would actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't.
If you have storming off in the middle of the argument that you just think is extraordinarily bad, please email us at realmsunknown at thebuglepodcast.com. That's realmsunknown at thebuglepodcast.com. Speaking of mailing in, that brings me to convince me to read this book, which is the section where you convince me to read this book or movie or other piece of media. I'm open to the different genres of absorbing information. But if you would like to send us in a voicemail to realmsunknown at thebuglepodcast.com, you could appear and convince me to read this book. And I'll tell you at the end whether I'm going to use my precious time on your suggestion. Our voice note from this week has been sent in by Sandy. Listener suggestion, convince me to read a book, Sandy.
I really want to convince you to read anything by Joe Abercrombie. He is probably my favourite author, and he has something that I think a lot of other fantasy authors lack, which is wit and humour and a sense of the absurd. The characters he writes are absolutely rooted in recognizable archetypes, and nothing is black and white. Everything is a dirty shade of grey. He has got these tightly knit but razor sharp plots that carry you through in one sitting, 500 pages, no bother at all. He's been working in this genre for years. If you're not a fan of Grimdark, this is the guy for you. He probably reached the peak with Best Served Cold, which is kind of set in the world that he established in the First Law trilogy, which is this kind of recognizable world, but has a lot of the tropes that you recognize from other fantasy fiction and kind of pokes them gently with a stick to see what happens. There's this undercurrent of some sort of magical realism happening in the background, but it is really very much about the characters and about the plot. He writes female characters brilliantly, I think, and I would heartily recommend and love it if you guys gave any Joe Abercrombie shot, but particularly Best Served Cold. Thanks, guys. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Sandy. You are absolutely correct. Of Grimdark, which we mentioned before, actually, we were discussing Grimdark as a subgenre. If you want an entry point, Joe Abercrombie is genuinely funny, and the lightness can take the sting out of some of the really intense brutality of what he discusses. It realms into, if you like horror, Eleanor, it realms into comedy. It pushes over the edge into sort of comedy horror, and the characters are so well drawn. That you are drawn along with them even when they're doing like really horrendous shit. So Sandy has not convinced me to read Joe Abercrombie, but only because I already have read Joe Abercrombie, and you probably have convinced me to go and flip back through some of the old Joe Abercrombies and re-encounter them anew. Eleanor, have you been convinced to dip your toe into the Grimdark just even a little?
I'm more convinced by Joe Abercrombie than any of the other ones. I think you know what I do. It's funny. I don't want to read straight grim dark stuff, but anything with a sense of humor. I've got quite a dark sense of humor. So you know what, I will. Brackets probably I'll forget, but I have good intentions.
Best Served Cold, I think, is an excellent example, and thank you for the recommendation, Sandy. And what time is it now? It's capitalism o'clock. Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't buy. Are you sick of one of your loyal crew hiding mutant bites from you? They swear they're just a little under the weather, but they seem to be a lot more grey than usual. You need the new mutant bite detector. Now none of your crew can just roll down their sleeves to cover up what could be all of your gang's downfall. They're sure to say, "I'm telling you, man, I'm absolutely fine," but you will know better and can confidently blow their brains out before anyone accuses you of acting crazy. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Abyss Spectacles. Staring into the abyss just got easier with the new Abyss Spectacles. If you're going to be spending so much time staring into the dark chasm of dread, why not do it with clarity? With extra tight nose pads to ensure that these spectacles don't slide off while you're gazing down into the great darkness. How embarrassing to lose your specs in there. There's no getting those back. We all know when you look into the abyss looks back at you. But how can you tell if you don't have optimum vision? That's Abyss Spectacles. And that's brought to you today by Realms Unknown. So to wrap up, 3 things that you can go forth into the world clutching to your chest like talismans given you as gifts before you leave your comfy home. Go, rediscover Buffy. It's not too late. Embrace Grimdark. Maybe start with Joe Abercrombie, and do watch Pantheon and let me know what you think about it by emailing us at realmsunknown@thebuglepodcast.com if you have something that you want me to look at. Also, send us a voice note to realmsunknown@thebuglepodcast.com. This show is part of the Bugle Podcast Network. We exist solely because you support us. Go to thebuglepodcast.com to become a member. We also list all of the books we discuss on the show in the notes section, where there's an affiliate store link that supports local bookshops. Speaking of bookshops, I have a book. It's called A Passion for Passion, and it is on tour. I'm doing a book tour. There'll be a Q&A. There's a lot of jokes. There's a story about how I wrote the book. If you want to come along, we still have dates available. If you go to alicefraser.com or the Bugle Podcast, there are my dates up there for the remaining dates of the tour. We are all over the place, and it's been so much fun. The book is called A Passion for Passion. The tour is called A Passion for Passion. I'm called Alice Fraser. You can also join me at my writers' meetings at patreon.com/Alice Fraser. Eleanor, have you got anything to plug?
Yeah, I've got a book. It's called A Passion for Passion for Passion, and it's about my passion for... No, it's called Life Lessons from Historical Women, and it's all about women from history that I think are really cool and have been a bit overlooked. I am also doing my Haunted House show from Last Fringe, award-winning Haunted House show from Last Fringe at the Soho Theatre in London, 24th, you got to plug it, 24th to 26th of March. So please come to that because, as I think I've said before on The Gargle, they send you a report every day on how many tickets you've sold. It's very stressful. So please come along if you live in London. That's me for now.
Yeah, well, what I've been doing on my tour so far on the 2 dates is I've not sold a lot of tickets to the tour, but of the tickets that people have come to see the show, more than half of both nights have bought books. So what I need to do is sell more tickets, and then I'll sell more books. The conversion rate is good. So come to my show if you want me to convince you to buy my book. Is that a pitch? I don't know.
Who knows at this stage?
It's close enough. This is a Bugle Podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Chris Skinner, and your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'll talk to you again next week.